Hey everyone, I thought it was time to judge some more books by their covers. This one is going to be a little bit different though, because I'm going to be talking about the 2024 Harper Perennial Olive editions. These were announced very recently. They come out in the fall. I will say, usually these efforts by publishers can be a bit of a mixed bag. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're not. It really just depends on the graphic designer, the art director, all that good stuff. This batch in particular kind of shocked me with how not great I think they are. But I do want to go through them. I'm going to go through and rank them from what I think is the best one to what I think is the not best one. Or the worst one. My favorite one is definitely The Between. This is by Tananarive Due. I read my first Tananarive Due recently with the Reformatory and really loved it. And I really have been wanting to read more of her work. And honestly, this cover is pretty cool. And this is probably the one out of all of these that I would actually be tempted to buy. These are all smaller formats, so I'm kind of interested to see how small it is. But yeah, I like the design here, the intermingling of the two faces, the color usage between the red and blue. It works for me. Again, I don't know if it's like the best cover I've ever seen, but out of this batch, I think it's the most interesting. My second favorite is Bird Box. This one I actually saw in isolation outside of the context of the rest of the program. And I thought it was really cool. I mean, I like the intermingling with the illustration. Again, I think the illustration is a photo or a couple photos that have been manipulated in Photoshop. There's nothing wrong with that, especially when the results are successful, like this is. I really think the color contrast and the use of light and shadow is really effective here. Next, we have Classic Works of Horror by Edgar Allan Poe. So basically, it's Edgar Allan Poe as a raven. It doesn't look bad. Like from a graphic design perspective, it's fine. It's totally fine. Picture of a raven that has had, some Photoshop level adjustments, probably maybe some other kinds of filters. Other than that, it's fine. Next up is When the Reckoning Comes. And this is very similar to Edgar Allan Poe in that it's fine. I don't really think it's bad. It's just, again, kind of generic. I mean, I think that's sort of the overtone of a lot of these, is I really feel like it kind of genericizes the look of the book so much that to me, I find it very unappealing in general. Now we're getting into the territory of the books that I don't think are fine. I actually have some serious problems with. First up is Dracula. Now, if you're going to re-release Dracula for the 5 millionth time, then I just feel like you need to put more effort in than what's shown here. With all of these, they're going for simplicity, and that's just a hard thing to do in design well, because the line between something being simple and strong and being simple and boring is pretty thin. Again, that can be very subjective, but I just find this cover in particular, like, yeah, it's kind of a scary illustration, photo illustration kind of thing going on, but it's so obvious. There's not really anything interesting going on design wise to make this really stand out. This Lovecraft Country cover for me, I think one of the reasons why I really dislike it, and there's another cover that's coming up that there's a similar reason for this, is because the original cover is so strong and striking. And this one, again, it just sort of genericizes things. There's some like kind of like baby's first Photoshop stuff going on here that I just feel like could use a little more something, or a little bit of a stronger design. Like there's some cool stuff here. The inversion of color with the headlights is kind of interesting. They do kind of create this sense of creeping dread. But the thing about it is I don't really think the designer read the book. I think they just saw Lovecraft Country and kind of went from there. So to me, this doesn't really represent what the book is actually about. So that's kind of a problem. Then there's The Thief of Always. In some ways, I actually think this is one of the stronger designs, because the fish is very interesting looking, having the house within the eyeball, the color choices of the gray and this blue. The problem with this is the original hardcover of The Thief of Always. And yeah, like it probably looks a little dated in some ways, but with this, you get the cool illustrations done by the author himself. This is done by Clive Barker, and you get those throughout. There's all kinds of cool illustrations. There are interesting, chapter headings and things. I don't know if the interior of the book has this, but the exterior really undersells what this book could be and what it was in its original form. So that's one of the reasons why it's pretty high up on the list for me, because I think this is just such a steep downgrade. And to me, if you're going to release these new editions of books, they should be upgrades, not downgrades. And then finally, we have The Exorcist. This is the book, honestly, that kind of drove me to want to make this video, even though it was time to do a new, judging books by its covers anyway. This is why I decided to do this video about this particular subject. This book cover is awful. It is really, really bad. I'm sorry to whoever designed this. You probably will never see this anyway. But you maybe were on a tight budget, shrunk timeline. I get it. But this, I think I said something about Baby's first Photoshop with Lovecraft Country. This is definitely like Baby's first Photoshop. It is kind of embarrassing, honestly. Like, it's just a photo of a child that looks like it, came from one of those like old photo memes. And then they did some, darkness around the eyes and stuff. They did put a little extra effort into the type treatment of this. Most of the type treatments of all these are pretty similar, pretty basic. There's some attempt to do something with the placement of them, but this one they actually went the extra step and tried to put them into a cross. A few things about that. I don't know if it's particularly successful. At least it's sort of interesting. It is something. It's much better than the illustration. Although part of me did think maybe the cross should be upside down, but I get why it's not on this cover. So what did you think of these covers? I'd love to know which ones you liked, which ones you didn't like. Are you actually thinking about buying any of these versions, or will you just go back and find a past version of it?